Jesus is in. He's up there. He's looking over us. He's waiting for the day. And we all hope that day is coming soon. Jesus is in all the way. And as the word of Pastor Colin there says, there is a propensity in human beings to not stay in, to sometimes be in and out. To be at possibly different depth, and the Lord will just do everything He can in order to keep us there. He doesn't just do everything and never ceases to call us in. He just does everything He can to keep us in and to move us forward and to move us from strength to strength in our faith and in what we do. And part of what He does is from time to time send us in the wilderness just a bit. Now that wilderness is a little bit different for each one of us. The reason at different times in our lives or whatever He sends us into that wilderness a bit will change just a bit. It can be because we have something to learn. It can be because we need some prompting. It can be a number of things. In any case, when we talk about wilderness, just generally, I think we can agree that wilderness is a place that most of us would perceive as uncomfortable, dangerous possibly, testing, unpredictable, okay? Isn't it funny how in life you can be one day just comfortable sitting in your chair, you pray, you have your Bible, you have your cup of tea or whatever it is that you do at this time, and everything seems to be fine. And just like that, overnight or over a couple of weeks or whatever it is, you find yourself just way out in the wilderness and you say, where was my chair? It can just happen. Your world can be turned upside down. And us as believers, well, we always can turn to the Lord. We can. We have that thing. If we're in the wilderness, but if we have that compass. We have that compass and we can follow it. Anyway, how on earth do we find ourselves in the wilderness? Well, sometimes we put ourselves through it. I'm now talking more on an earthly basis. Sometimes you might just put yourself through it, voluntarily or stupidly. I give you an example. I was back in late 1983. I think I'd only been in Australia for a few months. I found myself just work my way up to Daintree Forest, just there up there. So we're talking about definitely some kind of wilderness. In those days, actually, there was no sealed road yet going up to Cooktown. They had only just opened a road, and the greenies were apparently just threatening to blow it up. It just meant absolutely nothing to me. And because I was 21 years old and I could just, I was fit and I thought I could just conquer the world just like that, I decided, you know what, I'm going to walk from Daintree to Cooktown because that looks pretty good on the map. That'll be easy. You just follow the seashore and there'll be plenty of waters, there is creeks there, so that's all good. So I had my backpack. I read a little book about a couple of snakes and some plants not to touch. So I was ready. I could just go up. I was ready for a nice trip in the wilderness, and I put me through it. So in my backpack, I had a little bit of water. I had a couple of cans of food in there. Some of them was one of my favorite. They were actually peas. They were green peas. I love green peas when you can get them out of the thing. And when it got to a point where actually I arrived at some place, and I lived on that beach for about 7 days. I never saw anyone in a spot that's now called Cape Tribulation, and I went to it a number of years later, and now it's four-wheel drives everywhere. I saw nobody. For 7 days I saw nobody. I lived on coconut. I thought I was going to fish. I never even saw a fish. Whatever. So I tell you what, after a few days, that can of green peas, you went like, oh man, this is going to be so good. And I just opened the can of peas and I just dug into it and I went, wow! Some idiot went and put mint in it. I said, who puts mint in peas? You know, anyway, that's the way it was for me. So yes, even my peas, but they felt good. Okay. I stopped at Cape Tribulation, which is very far from Cooktown, because when I was just going through there, you know, I just soon realized that every time I step a foot in the creek, I went, where's the crocodile when I hear the creak? I saw something hanging out. That isn't a snake, you know, and just whatever else. I was actually really quite terrified in my own way. After a while, I realized that whatever I did was just stupid, okay? So I was just totally the Daintree equivalent of and the Swiss Daintree equivalent of our, I don't know, Asian and Japanese friend that just think even if you can't swim, you can just go into any wave you want and stay as far away from the flags as you like. Anyway, you know, we can sometimes go to the wilderness because of personal goals. We just get in there. It can be a challenge. It can be something like this, you know. It can be a Bear Grill for some of you who know this guy, you know, he just simply likes to go in there and show how to drink, you know, to go through the desert and drink camel byproducts. He's actually quite all right and all that sort of stuff just because it looks good, and I'm just saying, yeah, you can have it, mate, that's all good. And other times, others might put us through it. Right? Let's say in the army, for example. You know, I got sent in the wilderness in the army a few times. I think there was a few that went through that as well. And the army uses the wilderness very well in order to do things, for you, to you, whatever. But there is a goal, okay? But whatever the reason is in there, God's always in charge of it. He's always behind there. Ultimately, He's in charge of whatever option you want to go through there. So wilderness really relates to the unknown. It relates to the unexpected. The one thing, though, is that when you've been in the wilderness once, you know just a little bit more what to expect the second time. Okay, so you learn that if you're going to go in the wilderness again, well, maybe to pack your Swiss knife is a lot better than another clean pair of underwear. It's going to be far more useful to you. So, you know, just different things at different time. It also allows you, as you grow through this, to make you stronger and more able to actually support and help others through their time in the wilderness. Okay. So whatever the source or the reason really, a trip in the wilderness actually brings people's true color out. You just figure out who's what. It makes you stronger. It'll prepare you. And if it doesn't make you stronger, well, it'll kill you. But, you know, it's just one of those things. So prepare and strengthen is really in part why God sends us or sends people through wilderness. And quite obviously, as I said before, that wilderness can be just a little bit different at different times of our life. And really it's consistent with 1 Peter 5:10, which says, you know, after you have suffered for a little while, God Himself will restore, strengthen, confirm, and establish you in whatever order. I mix them up sometimes. It's all part of a cycle that just, I know it's textually or in context, it's a spiritual thing. I've already had a speech or a sermon about that. But we find just a lot of those little cycles of restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you in our lives as we go along. Anyway, when the people, for example, decided not to enter the promised land when they were in their wilderness, God used the wilderness also as a judgment in this case, right? But even though it was a judgment. The golden goal behind all of this was to teach his people to have a relationship with him. So what sometimes can actually feel to us like, oh God, why are you putting me through this? Well, I didn't deserve that. It was really that there is, it's not just, and sometimes it is because, well, we deserve the kick in the pants. I mean, what can I say? And other times, well, it was really because you were ready to go the next step. But whenever it is a judgment, the comforting part is in knowing that God's judgment is always timely. It always happens just when you need it, even if you would prefer not to. It is measured and it is necessary. Right? Tell me, measured and necessary is always what God will do as a good father would do for his children. Right? God is loving. He is not cruel. He doesn't do that just because he can. And because of that love, he's going to go to astonishing depth for us, to the point where he will die for us. Okay? He will, well, what can I say? For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whosoever believes on him will not perish but have eternal life. That's the kind of depth he will go through. And this is just the end product, really, because before that he went through 30 years of an absolutely amazing life, and 3.5 years in particular that were not the easiest. So he went with that. Talking about Jesus, by the way, notice how God's testing or judgment always seem in the Bible to be accompanied by the number 40, or a lot of the time anyway. You got the 40 days temptation of Jesus. We had 40 years in the wilderness. We had the spies were in Canaan for 40 days. We had Moses was actually away for 40 years with his sheep and whatever, just waiting to take up the baton and start again. So it's not a bad idea when you read your Bible to keep actually that number 40 in your head. When you see that coming up, you can say, I think there is some kind of testing, there is some kind of something that might be associated with that. Even if it's not every time, you can just get it in there. Now what you don't want to do, however, is start doing weird things with that stuff. Okay, so it's not, to keep it in mind when you're in your Bible is a good thing. But if you're going to cancel the wedding because there was 40 people coming, now you've got a problem. Okay? All right? Or if you start making some strange stuff with it, I think you get the point. That gets more into occultism and just other sort of weird superstitious stuff. We can do without that. Okay? Now, for me, and at the time, I'm sure there was nothing biblical, but during my time in the army, we actually did a 40-hour walk in the wilderness, right? And those 40 hours was just like this. It was in the full of winter, so outside at night, that was probably getting down to the -20, -30, whatever it was. We had our full pack, we had our gun, and we were just going to go and take positions, different place, because the nasty Russians were coming. And we would just go, and the goal was we would not sleep, we would not do anything or whatever for 40 hours. We had to stay awake, we had to stay alert, we had to take position and do whatever we can, and we would just go through the mountains and do, I can't remember how many kilometers, but just my legs still remember the exercise, okay? And then through that time, every now and then, somebody would stop, give us some tea or just whatever else. It was still apparently sort of humane in the way they pretended to do this. And as we walked, we got to the point where all of a sudden just a lot of things that normally matter to you, that just are in your head, they just suddenly just don't matter. You're kind of like transported completely elsewhere, and you transcend pretty much, you go through and over things that you think that you can normally do. It's simply because you have to, because that's the circumstances that you're in. And for example, I remember clearly that whenever we would take a break, and we were allowed to stop walking for a few minutes, usually about 10 or 15, it got to the point where my legs actually just would not move. It was that thing in my head. It was like, okay, get up. Still sitting down. Come on, get up. Still sitting down. And then I said, Lieutenant, my legs won't move. He says, well, are you telling me you can't get up? I said, yes. He said, well, you were able to say you can't, therefore you can. Okay? I said, I don't care how you're going to get up, but get up. So, I used my gun and just get up. And actually, once I got up, I actually couldn't get walking. My legs just, okay, walk. Right? Might as well be peddling in yogurt. Nothing was happening. Okay, and so I physically took my leg to put that one on there and that one on there, and eventually just went, and everywhere. We'd get so tired that we'd be one behind the other, and we would say, okay, right on, I'll just go in front of you and hold on to the bag, and you'd fall asleep, and the guy in front of you would actually just drag you forward. Actually, you may have experienced that. You may have gone through that sort of thing as well there. But that was just quite amazing. The one thing you were not allowed to do is give your gun to anyone. So they had to do pretty much everything, but your gun had to stay with you, okay, for obvious reasons. So that was the one thing you couldn't do. Anyway, went and did things like a friend of mine, that's probably where he went too far. We could try to eat the snow. We could try to do things if we were thirsty. He just decided to go and eventually, forgetting absolutely any kind of safety thing, he just went and drank water out of a little brook that was coming out of some village, and he ended up with typhus or some nasty thing. Anyway, for him, he finished walking for a while after that. So I swear to you that after that experience, it was a whole new meaning for me when I said I can't. And I still remember that to this day. It was just an amazing sort of thing that he just took us through. Anyway, what kind of wildernesses are they out there? Desert, jungles, mountains, Antarctica, whatever, all of these places. But you could say that almost any environment that hasn't been tamed by man is to be considered wilderness. I've got a backyard to prove it. Yeah. So that would be pretty much that. In the Bible itself, wilderness is just pretty much every time he just talks about the desert. We're talking about a place that is devoid of people, who has very few in it, and we imagine it as at least dry and whatever. So basically, what was wilderness, besides that empty place, what was wilderness to a Jew some 2,000 years ago? What was it in their mind? What did it represent? What was it for them to be in the wilderness? Right? And it could certainly apply for people also way past 2,000 years ago. Now, if we just go around the biblical time, we can get some biblical clues when it gets to that. So in Matthew 12:20-43, when an impure spirit comes out of a person, he goes through arid places seeking for a place to rest and does not find it, which I like that part. It's when he picks up at 45 there, and then he comes back with 7 of his mates or whatever. I don't like that bit. But anyway, so we got an idea of spirits in arid places, just not good. Okay. There is another story that just goes along with this. Is a story of 2 goats on the day of atonement. Right? We got a goat which they named Azazel. That was carrying, on which was put all the sins of the nation at the time, and they would send that goat to die in the desert. Off you go, with all the toxic stuff, like, whoop, put that in the desert, like we do with radioactive waste today. Anyway, just in the desert, and then there would be another goat that would be going to be sacrificed to the Lord for the nation. Okay. Now, the legend has it that, and some of you may know this, or do know this, legend has it that one day the goat came back. right? So they saw the goat full of the sin of everything that just came back into Jerusalem. So you would imagine a believing Jew that just actually sees that and is coming straight back at you and said, man, I'm out of here. All right? So it created panic in the population. So since then, they just simply decided, well, okay, we're still going to do the same thing. We're still going to put the sin on the goat, right? But we're going to drive it in a particular spot in the wilderness and then down the cliff. Okay, so that way it didn't come back. Now they would have had a very brave man to actually just to actually get that goat there, I suppose. But I don't know how they did that. If they just picked a number in a hat or on a hat or whatever. But other Judaic sources tell us that it was sent specifically to the fallen angel Azazel in the wilderness as well. Whether Azazel is there or not or whatever is not a subject for today. But we can get with this the idea that for the Jew of the time, to find yourself in the wilderness was to find yourself in a place where there is just lots of demons, lots of spirits, lots of stuff you just don't want to have anything to do with. Right? So when God tells you, well, okay, because you decided not to cross over, I'm going to send you for 40 years in the wilderness. That must have gone really like a ton of bricks. So yeah, fabulous. Okay, we're going to get an education, right? That would have been actually really terrifying for them. Now, so the desert was a very scary and supernaturally charged place to them. Now, in saying that, though, I dare say that it's like that a little bit everywhere in the world. It doesn't have to be for Jews. It doesn't have to be biblical. I mean, really, whether we take the Bunyip of the Aboriginal people here, or we take the Teufelsbrücke of Switzerland. I'll tell you a little bit more about that weird name. Teufelsbrücke actually means the devil's bridge. In Switzerland, where really anywhere in the wilderness is kind of associated with stuff that we don't know. We start to put boogeymen in there, right? It's just a natural thing that we have. And I think it's not natural. As a matter of fact, I think it's something that is ingrained in us. I think that is one of those things that God has put inside of there. It's a part of information that we do have. We should have our hackles up when we go into the wilderness. And I'm not saying just simply when we step outside, but I'm saying more so talking about kind of a spiritual wilderness here. We will get to that in a moment, okay? But just to tell you the story of the Teufelsbrücke, because I like that one. So the Devil's Bridge. The story goes, the herdsmen were in the mountain. There was just those little villages. You can picture them exactly like you have on the postcards. You have the cows and the sheep and whatever, and on one side of the high mountain and a little village there and just whatever else, exactly like this. But sometimes to go from one place to the other can be really difficult because you might have this ravine that is just there that forces you to go for hours around and go down and back up or whatever, so you need a bridge. Now in that particular place, it was so wild it was almost impossible. Now it was impossible to build a bridge according to the legend, the story. So there is this herdsman that was just really there, and he just said one day, instead of saying, please God, get me a bridge, somehow he wished the devil would build one. So guess what? The devil appeared and said, I'll build you one. I'll build you a bridge. And the herdsman said, really? He said, yes, I'll build you a bridge. The cost will be, I will have the soul of the first one to cross the bridge. So the Swiss guy said, yes. The herdsman said, yes, okay, no problem. So the devil built the bridge, and there it was, inauguration day. The Swiss herdsman got there and he sent the goat on it. Devil was not happy. He didn't want the goat. Okay? So because the devil got really angry, he just went and got a massive boulder, and as he was walking towards the bridge to destroy it, he passed an old woman that was just going up the thing, and she was wearing a cross. He saw the cross and he got scared. He dropped the boulder and hightailed it out of there. So that's the legend go. So we got our bridge. So all sorts of strange story. What I find interesting with that is the goat. Right? Isn't that interesting that we get that goat again, and that goat was basically going to pay for the sin of the herdsman that just had called on the devil rather than anything else. I find that interesting. It's always interesting. But the point is not that story today. Another thing that was extremely interesting is this is a very, very old story, right? That's legendary. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of years old, maybe even 1,000 years old. I don't know exactly when that story started. Have you ever heard of a tunnel called the Gotthard in Switzerland, right? It's an absolutely amazing place. Not just the Swiss alone, with a combination of nations, they actually dug a 57 kilometers long tunnel through the Alps. 57 kilometers long. I took that tunnel one time. Even to a Swiss it gets boring. Right? It's just astounding. You're in there and it just does not end. It was astounding the amount of resources it took to do that. Now, why I'm bringing that up is because at the time it was finally ready, because it took many years, they had an inauguration for this tunnel, and it was done. That was in 2016. At that inauguration, there was a special part of the inauguration where they just made sure that there were some high dignitaries of all over Europe, at least, maybe even the world, that actually came down and assisted to this, and they basically dedicated. And I get the goosebumps on that. They basically dedicated the tunnel to the devil, according to the Teufelsbrücke story. That was just absolutely mind-boggling to me. And if you saw, because you can get that on YouTube, if you put the Gotthard inauguration 2016, you can still watch that. The whole enactment that they had in there is outright scary. It was just like having a black mass in front of the whole world. It was just amazing. Point again, wilderness, devil things or whatever, they're part of all the stories all around, right? So we know that there is a human inclination to put monsters and spirits in everything. That's just nothing new. It's not just biblical. When I was a kid, I was scared to go to bed because the wolves would come out of bed and eat me every day. A true story for many years, but I would actually physically feel it. It was astounding. I think that was actually demonic, but anyway, that's another thing. We've got all kinds of spiritually based fear for a reason or another. But you know what? As we grow up, we start to dismiss those things, don't we? As the world became civilized or becomes civilized, we start to poo-poo these things. They say that bunyip, come on, that's just for Stone Age people who just don't know what they're talking about, isn't it, or whatever. But we don't take the time to actually, this actually comes from somewhere. Maybe there is really something there. We just kind of become numb out of it. If anything, we might even find the story interesting, okay, or entertaining. Same with the Bible, as a matter of fact. If you just go, because I'm going to have to get back to the Bible sooner or later, sorry guys. So when right up to the 3rd century, pretty much, let's say in the 1st century, you would have asked any of the apostles, any of the people after, what was their interpretation of Genesis 6 or just whatever else, they would have had actually no problem at all to tell you that the offsprings of the angels were actually giants, that those giants did exist, that demons are most likely the disembodied spirits of those offsprings and so on. They would have had no problem with that. It was pretty much common knowledge, okay? Then from the 3rd century onwards, the church started to repress that. There was a thing that we didn't want that. We wanted to have stories where the church is in control, as in the denominational church is in control, where we can tell you the narrative and we will tell you exactly what this is about, and we start to allegorize all sorts of stuff, and when you really look into it, the stories just simply don't make sense anymore. All right? So we tend to dismiss it. And so we have we can say that the church is no stranger itself to this dumbing of the masses when it gets down to this, right? Now I go back to a quote that is actually nothing from anyone biblical, but he says the greatest trick the devil ever pulled is to make you believe he doesn't exist, right? Okay, you've all heard that one. I can see the nodding there. Well, we're not all fooled by that, are we? I mean, not everybody just doesn't get it, or they sort of take it up to a certain level. But if he can't fool you, then he will just drown it into all sorts of rubbish, isn't it? He's going to feed you that this is all just rubbish. You don't have to believe in that stuff. You can, as a matter of fact, it's a mega source of entertainment today. Right? So what do if we don't want you to believe in stuff? Well, we just put a lot of fake stories, we just put a lot of things in there, we just make it possibly entertaining, we make it just whatever we can with it, to the point where you're just completely overloaded with it and you don't even know what to believe in, right? Well, anyway, fake news and disinformation is nothing new, all right? Let's put it that way. It started a very long time ago. So, firstly, do I believe in evil spirits? Yes, I do. Absolutely I do, because you can't believe in God and not believe in the devil. I mean, that's really my perspective. They go, unfortunately one goes with the other there. It's very clearly in the Bible. Secondly, well, evil spirits are not to be joked around with. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to be aware of it. It is good. Some people in our work, we're going to have plenty of that. Keeping in mind, though, that most of the battles we're ever going to have with evil are going to happen between the ears of the believer, as my mentor would tell me. All right? It certainly is that. But they're clearly in the Bible. All right? So that means no Ouija board, no tarot, no palm readings, none of that sort of stuff. We're not supposed to muck around with that. We just want to be away from that stuff, okay? Or other seances or whatever. And I really don't care if from tarot cards, you call them angel cards or whatever, as they do in some churches, I heard whatever. Just don't do that. Just stay away from it. It's just not what it's meant to be. Well, I got some bad news. Spirits don't like the wilderness. And they would much rather live in a nice, fresh human being that's ready to do whatever they can, okay? And that's where we go back to Matthew's 12:43 to 45 there, where the exorcised spirits returns, not just itself, it doesn't return. He brings 7 back, and they worse than him. So we really don't want this. Then I got the good news, which is in James 2:19. You believe that there is one God? Well, good. I think Pastor Dave told us that last week as well, brought that up. Even the demons believe that and tremble. Okay, so there is just something there, meaning demons may not fear you, but they certainly fear Jesus Christ. Alrighty then, so if Jesus Christ is in you and we belong to Jesus, we've become kind of stinky to them. Right? They just don't want to be in there. You guys seen the movie Braveheart?
Yes.
See you later, Phil. Yeah, you've seen the movie Braveheart, right? One of the scenes in there that really got me, that really got me in there, I thought really powerful, is when they were after him and he had to go down the gully and he was really trying to escape them, and he finds a rotten carcass, the rotten carcass of a cow or something, and it smells so much, it's so bad, he actually just goes, reluctantly, completely and disgustingly, actually wiggles himself inside that carcass, and it stinks so much that the bad guys actually won't go near it, right? So for me, I kind of imagine like for an evil spirit, when he approaches a Christian and actually wants to get in there, they say, no, you know what, no. I'm not going there, that stinks way too much, I just don't want to be there, okay? That's the good news. Probably not very biblical thing, but in terms of the way I said it, but, there is enough there there is enough there to tell us that there is definitely a strong association between evil spirits and the wilderness, or whatever wilderness might be, okay? So when I see somebody emptying themselves and doing yoga, no picture of somebody doing yoga on the beautiful wilderness there or whatever, personally I just see a stupid goat waiting for Azazel, all right? But now that certainly doesn't mean at all that there is anything wrong with going in the wilderness or whatever, and appreciate what God has made for us, and pray and meditate there in the Christian way of actually doing this, not in emptying yourself to the universe, all right? And praise God for what He brought. He's definitely there. Natural wilderness is made in heaven. It's top quality stuff. Yeah, even though what we get today is a corrupted version of it, right? But enough of that. How about the spiritual wilderness that I mentioned before? Right, because that certainly exists there. Sorry. So you know how we said that the definition of wilderness could probably be, or a good definition of wilderness could probably be any place that hasn't been tamed by man, then I'd say that spiritual wilderness, I see it as any mind or soul that has not been tamed or is not under dominion of Jesus Christ. Would that actually make sense? Okay, so that's where it is, and it can look very different. When you're born again, what will happen eventually is that you're filled with the fullness of God, right? That's a sentence in there, that's a verse that always just blows my mind away. So that's Ephesians 3:19, okay? How big is God? How big is He? Well, yeah, I couldn't express it either, because I can't express infinity. Like, this is how big He is. And yet, as a human being, I can be filled with the fullness of God. I don't know how that works, but I can tell you this. How much room does it leave for demons and evil spirits? Nil, nada, zip, zero, niente, rien du tout. Okay? It just does not. So that's the good news. Which is just as great, because where we are and everywhere we might go and be around, every time you're in a crowded place or at the JW convention or something, you can just find yourself with people that are not filled with the fullness of God. So as much as we can't be possessed, we can't be filled with any demon, we certainly can be oppressed by it. And we can be in different environments where things can actually happen, where we can be influenced, okay? These people, unfortunately, they seem to be, I'll choose my word carefully, I think I'm allowed to say it there, they're actually hell-bent in actually just pushing you in the other direction. One way or another. There is just something about this. And we need to be aware of it. We need to look for the clues. We need to have our hackles up. We need to listen to the Spirit. We need to do a few different things. We'll talk about it at the end as to what it is that you can do when we get to that. But they just want to drag us into their wilderness. They want us there. All right. Now, the Bible talks about these guys, but truly in its context, I'm talking about 2 Peter 2:12. In context, it really talks about false prophets and people who are really far more inclined to go a lot further into dragging you there, okay? People that have introduced the church and actually trying to drag you the wrong way. But still, it gives us a good idea. But these people blaspheme in matters they do not understand. They are like unreasonable animals, creatures of instinct, born only to be caught and destroyed. And like animals, they too will perish. When the first time I read this as a fresh Christian, I'd just about sat on my butt. God doesn't talk like that. But there is just, yes he does. Yes he does. So we just definitely want to be very careful around people and when we start to hear different things. So not everybody is at that level, and I don't think that God's idea is to have these people destroyed immediately, but the reality is that some of them will be, absolutely. So anyway, it's our job to fight against this, and we have an authority to actually do this. If we look at Mark 16:17, it tells us, and these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will drive out demons, they will speak in new tongues. Okay? So that means that we do have, there is something where we are actually equipped, at very least at some level, to actually definitely resist these things and possibly even get rid of them, even do something about it. Now, I'm certainly not telling you that each people here, or it is the job of every Christian to just go look around and try to see somebody who's behaved and say, "Lord, exorcise out of there," and just whatever. We don't try to go and find it, right? Jesus didn't do it. You guys know that. It always came to them. Well, let it come to you if that day happens. Have your hackles up, pray, do whatever you need to do in order to get these things. But it is well within your authority to say, "Here, get out of there, go back to your wilderness." Okay? Well within your authority. But I guess it's a gift, or it's something that can be on your life at any time, to actually have that, and maybe some people are more involved with these things than others. Fortunately, I'd say I'm blessed with not having that gift in particular. So that's good, because frankly I don't want it, but it's there. Okay, it's definitely there. I'm happy I have it, but that's not what I want to specialize in. Thank you very much. One thing that is for sure is that you participate in this fight. We are called to participate in this fight, and you are fighting that every time you evangelize. Every time you get out there and you tell somebody about the Lord, every time you tell your schoolmates about Jesus Christ, and you do that, every time you do this, you give cause for the demons to just have a whiff of that terrible rotting carcass they don't want to get near. Okay, every time you do this, you participate in that fight. You build up a wall. You actually help for the fight, and you are going to help getting strongholds to fall. Okay, every time you do that. And it's really, in any case, just as you wouldn't go in the desert, just as you wouldn't go in the jungle unprepared, as a silly Swiss who's just going to walk for 100 k's up to Cooktown, you wouldn't want to engage in that sort of things unprepared either. Now that's a pretty big subject. We're talking about spiritual warfare here. That's definitely not something I'm going to sort out in a few minutes here. But there's 4 simple things that you can do. First thing is to be aware of who's around you, of your surroundings, is to realize who you are actually mingling with. What are the people that you surround yourself with? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? So that'll be the first thing, okay? The second thing, and it doesn't matter if you're a kid or an adult, it's the same rules. It doesn't change. The next thing is begin your day in prayer. Right? You begin your day in prayer, you thank the Lord for protection, you thank the Lord for everything around you, you ask for discernment, you thank for that discernment and for that wisdom in anything that you do. Yeah. That takes all of about 20 seconds, honestly, in your prayer. Not that if you get to say it, the Lord is going to forget about it, but it's good to just put us in the right place. Amen? All right. The next thing is to wear the full armor of God. Right? We know the full armor of God. We know the helmet of salvation. And very importantly on that one, not that the others are not important, but importantly in that one is have your feet shod in the Word of God. Okay, have your feet shod in the gospel, because this is where we have our protection. This is where we find the answers. This is all right. Okay, so be aware of that one. And by the way you put on the armor is by prayer. Okay, so you're going to have number 3, just go to number 2. Start in prayer, put on the armor of God. And the next thing is, hey, there is nothing wrong with admitting that you're a little bit over your head or you're uncomfortable with what's going on. So don't be thinking that because you're now going to open up and talk to somebody about these things, they're going to look at you like you're some kind of nutcase, right? Obviously, you want to choose the person you talk to. So you talk to your spiritual leader. You talk to to somebody who has some sort of stand in God and that you know is solid in those things. You can open up, and they should know about these things. And if you get an answer like, oh well, no, you just imagine you're imagining the aliens or you're imagining or whatever, then just go talk to somebody else. Right? Not that I'm saying that there are actually aliens that take people away, but I'm saying that there are things that are posing themselves, that are pretending to be aliens in order to take people away. Okay, so that's where I'd go. That's my stand on it. Yeah. Okay, so that would be really what we need to do. Now, when you know you're walking with God and you're still having a hard time and still challenged in all those things, well, there is another 40 days that I haven't talked about. That was the 40 days of Elijah in the cave. Okay, he was having a hard time. He was being challenged. He definitely got sent in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, he was completely dependent on God. Completely dependent on God. And sometimes that's the place God is going to send us. Not because we're punished. I mean, Elijah was right into the will of God. What a life this man had. Okay? And yet he still got sent there. There was still a hardship. There was still all those things. God was building him up. He was making him ready for whatever else he had to be. He had to do. I mean, once he was out of that, and once he found out there were 7,000 people that were the remnant of God in there, he was sent to Syria. He anointed a king. And that was not the last one he anointed either. And then he got to pass on the baton to Elijah. But you guys know that part. So Elijah basically was further prepared. He was further sanctified. He was made fit for the part he had to play. So remember, if you're having a hard time, if sometimes you think, oh, well, what is God doing to me? How come he's not around? Or whatever. There is something in there for you to, Lord, press in him, pray. You are being further sanctified. You are being made fit for the part you're going to have to play. What you have to find out is what is that part. Okay? Not easy. Not easy. I'm not telling you I've got all the answers. Certainly not in that sermon. Okay? But you're made fit for the part you have to play, that you might do whatever the Lord wants you to do. And that, people, is grace in your life. All right. Thank you for listening. God bless you all.